Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A Better Life New York here at Studio 3J with part 2 of our conversation with Jack Stanley, Stories from Dallas. Please like and subscribe, and remember that we're also not just on YouTube video, but we're also on all major podcasting services. Thank you so much, and part 2. Can we just step back for a minute?
Sure.
You said something boldly that the car in back of the limousine was spattered with blood. And I'm just going to say, how do you know that? Did someone firsthand tell you that, or you read that, or?
I read that.
I believe it too, but that
One of the motorcycle riders was absolutely covered in blood.
That's correct.
The thing is that,
it was back
into the
It
side.
was back to the wheel. If you look at that, and if you look at the photo that has him in it, that places the limousine in a place where Oswald could not shoot because there was a tree in the way. And so the shot rings out. The photo is cropped, so you don't see the motorcyclist, and you don't see the line in the road, and you don't see the tree.
Oh, yeah.
When you look at the full picture, and it's very well known,
That's the one where he's doing
the
there.
motorcycle, and
He's doing that in the
and
picture.
you're right, he's grabbing his throat. And is it possible that they say that was the shot that was in his back that didn't go all the way in, which is most likely a subsonic bullet from someplace that no one knows where it came from, because it didn't come from Lee Harvey Oswald, and no one really heard it, and it didn't really puncture that far because it was subsonic.
There's a reason because there's a very important reason, just to throw this in, that doesn't get talked about at all. John F. Kennedy had a very bad back. He always wore a back brace. He was wrapped in his back brace.
That's right.
In Dallas, which was also wrapped with ace bandages that went around his legs and everything else, that kept him ramrod straight. That bullet that went in the back had to go through that back brace. It couldn't go far. It was weakened. It just made a slight. It didn't go any more than an inch into his back, according to the doctors at the autopsy. The thing is that once he is shot in the back, which wouldn't have killed him, and then he was shot in the throat, that's an entry wound. The doctors at Parkland said it was an entry wound. That, of course, it actually hit a nerve that affected his breathing. And it cut off his breath, and so he was reacting to not being able to breathe. And then he was hit with the headshot. But the fact is, he couldn't get down. He was held in place by his back brace. Something very important that's never talked about, and I don't know why. If you watch the Zapruder film, he just sits there. When you're shot, you crumple. He crumpled within the back brace. That's so vitally important and so rarely talked about. Connolly's down because he got shot. He crumpled. Kennedy sits there. Yet you watch all of these various programs and nobody seems to say a word about it.
It's interesting. I did a 2-part audio podcast with a researcher on JFK, and we never spoke about the back brace. So
you have to understand, if you're shot, you're going to crumple. It's a natural reaction.
It wouldn't be. Absolutely.
And this is what I find so incredible with so many researchers and experts and things like that, is they don't mention that. And so my theory is that's why that bullet in the back didn't go very far. They had to go through that back brace. And the other thing is the doctors in Parkland had to cut the back brace off of him and threw it to the side. It's just something that's been totally left out of the equation. Had he not been wearing that back brace, he would have been hit in the back and fallen over, and he'd be alive.
Yeah.
It's quite profound if you think about it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's amazing, 1963, we're talking about the minutia of a day. You know, there's so many things. And what also, I know that you've spoken to Gerald Ford.
Yes, he's the last survivor.
He was president, I
Yeah,
believe.
he was the last survivor of the Warren Commission. Consider that
interesting group of people.
Of people that were absolutely terrified of Allen Dulles. See, Allen Dulles had been fired from the CIA by Kennedy for that whole Bay of Pigs situation.
And they hated each other anyway.
Oh, Dulles despised Kennedy, and the feeling was mutual. But the thing is, even though he fired Dulles from the CIA, he was still running it from home. And then LBJ said, we just got to get this over with and done with. And we just got to basically have a scapegoat. And so he put Warren, Chief Justice Warren, in charge. He threatened Warren to be in charge because Warren didn't want it. And he said, do you want to be responsible for World War III?
I've heard those phone calls.
Yeah. And so he basically said, okay, I will do it, but he didn't run it. Allen Dulles ran it. Allen Dulles decided what will be evidence, what will not be evidence. The entire team never saw a photograph. They saw drawings. Can you imagine that? There was an autopsy done. There were official photographs taken. Yet the party that was to decide the fate of the assassination, the understanding it, were not allowed to look at any of the photographs. That's insane. That tells you right then and there, it was nothing but a sham. And ranks right with Mother Goose, the Tooth Fairy, and everything else. There's just nothing realistic about the Warren Commission. It was basically put together to just quash all kinds of innuendo and rumor. Because nobody, at least most people, didn't know what happened. And so they just basically needed to tell the American public, we've solved the issue, and let's go on. Now, there's one other thing that's very fascinating with Oswald, because I don't think Oswald fired a single shot. And
neither do I.
Maybe I'm going against the grain here. There's something that's very important that's rarely mentioned as well. I always like those things that are rarely mentioned because they're always more fascinating. When he was taken in by the police, the first thing they gave him was a paraffin test. And for those of you who don't know what a paraffin test is, when you shoot a gun, there is residue that goes into your skin. You cannot avoid it. You cannot remove it right away. It takes a while. So if you fired a gun, they give you a paraffin test on your skin and it will detect if you fired a gun within the last 24, 36 hours. He flunked the test. There was no residue. How can you even say he fired a shot? No one
Well, you do
talks
that by
about
putting a
that
pump print
test.
on a rifle.
Yeah, no one talks.
That's-
They're holding the thing up to their face if you're firing a rifle. Who talks about the paraffin test?
He was most likely in a cafeteria having a cup of coffee, or standing on the front steps of the book depository. And
I
that's
will
why the NBC film has never come out, because it's going to show him standing there.
Yeah, the police came in and asked him a question, and he answered it. And someone else came in and says, "Is there a phone?" He pointed at the phone to them. Do I think that Oswald had ideas and understanding what had just happened? Yes, I think he did. I think he was involved with the CIA. I think he was involved with the FBI to a degree. Because you got to remember, he had went to Russia and said he didn't want to have anything to do with the United States. And then he decided, oh, he didn't like Russia anymore. And then the United States flew him back. Am I missing something here?
Treason, never renounced. It's typical CIA craft work.
Yeah. And also the other thing is, remember where he was working. He was working in Japan for a while. And what was he working on? The U-2 program.
That's right.
So
the
he
when
was.
he went to Soviet Union, he gave up secrets.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that famous picture of John Wayne and him?
No, I have never seen that picture. No.
There's a picture. So John Wayne is filming a movie at the base in Japan. And he's sitting having lunch, and they take a picture, and in the background, you search it on YouTube, on Google when you get done. I don't have it with me. And Lee Harvey Oswald online with a tray getting lunch. What do you think of the chances of that?
Yeah, but the whole thing is, I know the thing is that there are so many people that will say the government will not lie to me about this. And Lee Harvey Oswald was expendable. They wanted to get rid of him, but this was the perfect opportunity. And Jack Ruby, what a history he has. He came from Chicago. He was running for Al Capone for a while, and they said he had no connection to the mafia. And according to the Warren Commission, of course.
Look at his phone records. He spoke to some of Giancano's guys almost daily.
Sure. The sad part is, this was so badly handled. This was beyond a conspiracy. This was just absolute criminal negligence. And there were several reasons behind it. And one of the things that I have heard, and I cannot prove it, but what I heard was that the CIA was very upset with JFK. And one of the reasons was that he was talking to Khrushchev. And yes, they became quite friendly with each other. And they would talk and share things. And the CIA gave JFK a document and made certain marks on it. And they had spies in Russia. And Khrushchev was talking about a document, and they had pictures of it, and they had the same marks. And so they were saying that JFK is a traitor.
He had that speech shortly before he was killed. I don't know how close it was, and I can't remember off the top of my head where it was.
It was the American University. American University.
Correct. And he's talking about a joint moon mission between the Soviet Union and the US, which means we have to share technology. And at that point, our rocket technology was moving beyond, was starting to get there. Certainly the moon missions had helped that. And not to forget that LeMay, who was head of the Air Force, just short time before that had came to Kennedy and said, listen, I think we can win a war by a nuclear first strike on the Soviet Union, and breaks out this plan, and there's a recording of the conversation, and explains to Kennedy how we can wipe the Soviet Union out by a nuclear first strike and take them in one fell swoop. After he leaves, Kennedy says, and they call us the human race. I mean, there was definitely dismay, and LeMay didn't like Kennedy for the Bay of Pigs because he wanted.
Oh,
him
he
to be in.
despised Kennedy.
I'm not biased. Not that I believe that LeMay had anything to do with the assassination, but
I have a feeling he knew about
infamous
it.
Autopsy.
He was there. Yeah.
I think a lot of people know about it.
A lot of people
So,
a lot of people wanted him dead. There's few presidents who have been so hated than John F. Kennedy. He stepped on a lot of toes. And also, he was not afraid to make comments, to say things, to challenge ideas. I remember watching him and just absolutely thrilled by the things that he was saying as a kid. And I have to tell, this is a good time to share another story. It was my fortune to know very intimately Jerome Hines. Jerome Hines was a world-famous operatic basso, leading basso at the Metropolitan Opera House, known all over the world. And he became the first American to sing Boris in Russia, which was a great coup, a great honor. And so, in October of 1962, he went to Russia. He said there was lots of things he found interesting about Russia. He said he went to a restaurant and he said the food was cold, the soup was lousy, and it wasn't very good. But he said his wife brought packs of cigarettes and hosiery, and she gave cigarettes and hosiery to all the various staff of the restaurant. They came the next night. The food was magnificent, and the soup was tremendous. But nonetheless, he toured around Russia performing, and eventually he performed Boris for Khrushchev. And this was exactly at the moment the Cuban Missile Crisis was reaching its apex. Think about this. This is amazing when you think about it. And he performs. And as he's getting done, Khrushchev is standing and applauding and cheering Jerome Hines. Hines doesn't see him. And he's waving his hands, and Hines doesn't see him. And so Hines walks off the stage, and his wife is saying, "You idiot. Khrushchev is out there waving at you. Go back on stage." So he goes back on stage, and then he sees him. And Khrushchev is waving and cheering and says, "Come meet with me." And so he said, there I was, if I put it in Jerry's voice, there I was, dressed as his czar. I was 6'6", and I was wearing 4-inch heels, so I was 6'10". And he said he was about 5 feet high. Yeah. And he said I was about 5 feet. He was about 5 feet tall and about 5 feet wide. And he said, "My goodness, you're tall." And he said, "Mr. Khrushchev, Mr. Premier, where I'm from in California, I'm known as a midget." And they laughed. And he said he presented Hines with some alcohol and said, "Let us drink to peace. Tell your president I want peace." And so they drank to peace and they embraced. And then Jerry immediately the next day is on a plane heading back to the United States. He said he got to the airport, Idlewild at the time, and the field was full of reporters because he's coming back from Russia. And the Cuban Missile Crisis is a full-blown thing, and nuclear war could start any moment. He said he lands, and Henry Kissinger gets into the plane. Now, who knew that Henry Kissinger was working in the Kennedy administration? But he was. And so he debriefed Hines on the conversation. And of course, he shares the messages from Khrushchev of how he wants to make sure we have peace. And then he goes to the White House and he meets with Kennedy. And he tells Kennedy basically the same thing, explaining to JFK that Khrushchev does not want war. He does not want a problem. He wants to work out a peaceable solution. And after that is done, that message from Khrushchev comes to Kennedy. He said, there's two sent. One is very consoling. The second is harsh, probably not written by Khrushchev. And the thing is that JFK has all this previous information that Khrushchev wants this. And if you ever see the history that they talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis, they say an opera singer. They never identify him. But the secret messenger between Khrushchev to Kennedy is an opera singer by the name of Jerome Hines, who is a very dear friend of mine. He used to call me his fourth son. And so after that event, after that was all over, and Kennedy, even though he did a lot of stuff, he conceded a lot of stuff that we didn't know at the time. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, he says to his brother, "This is a good night to go to the theater, just in case he gets assassinated." Because he always had his eye on history. He wanted to make sure he made history. But Jerome Hines was invited to the White House to a party after that whole thing. Kennedy's riding high. And he said he was sitting there for a second and stood up, and Kennedy happened to see him from the corner of his eye. And he said he fairly skipped over to me and said, "How was I?" And he said, I didn't know whether to pat him on the head and say, "Good boy," or say, "You were wonderful, Mr. President. How was I?" I just thought that was the funniest thing in the world. This is like the stuff you never get to hear. You don't get to hear this kind of stuff because it takes away from the official look. Kennedy was being playful. And he was quite proud of himself. This was an amazing moment. We do have to take our hats off to JFK because he would not go with the military. And the military didn't know that there were missiles all set to go in Cuba. They thought they were still being set.
Had control. It had been in control by the local man on the ground.
Yeah.
Not by the Russians.
Yeah. And they were not going to deal with any nonsense. If you attack them, they're going to fire the damn things. And of course, once that happens, as JFK said, there are no winners in a nuclear war. It got to a point where he contacted Jackie and the kids and to bring the kids back. Bring them here. If we're going to die, let's die together. I was too young. I didn't get to understand it. I saw my grandfather cry. I didn't understand why he was crying. We watched that broadcast by JFK. I saw it. I knew we were in trouble, but I was too young to understand the severity of the situation. But my grandfather, who was a World War I veteran and suffered from a lot of wounds from the war, when he saw that, he said, my God, the world's going to end. But that was a very interesting, fascinating look at JFK from Jerome Hines' observations. And of course, the involvement of Jerome Hines in this is so important, yet never talked about. It's amazing how many parts of these stories are left out.
That's history.
Yeah, that's history. Yeah.
What's left? It's written by the ones. It's written by the ones who survived, and Kennedy wasn't one of them.
Yeah. I will say that I saw in lecture.
I know you had.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I don't know what you're saying.
I was going to mention Gerald Ford.
Oh, Gerald Ford. Yes, I haven't talked about him, really. I met with Gerald Ford on November 10th. November 10th, 1999, we made recordings and we sat and talked. And of course, the Kennedy assassination came up. And he said he was with the Warren Commission. A lot of things he didn't say that I later found out that he did. But I am under the impression, this is my guess, I can't prove it one way or the other, but my feeling is that every member of the Warren Commission was terrified of Allen Dulles. And that what he said, they did. I can't prove that, but I'd be willing to say that I wouldn't be surprised because everyone was scared of him. And he basically ruled and decided what would be said, what would be done, what would not be done in the Warren Commission. Chief Justice Warren just sat there and said, yes, okay, fine, that's okay. That's the way it worked. Gerald Ford told me that he was asked by Lyndon Johnson to be part of the Warren Commission. He said he felt it was his duty. He had been friends with JFK. They shared an office. And he told me that many times he and JFK would go for walks around the Capitol at night. And they would talk about their ideas and their plans and things that they would like to do. Unbeknownst to either one of them, they would both be president. And he said that he had a very warm and friendly relationship with JFK. And he felt that when he was asked to do it on the Warren Commission, he felt that it was doing a service to his old friend. But he did lie about a number of things. He had a pre-set up form. He showed it
to you.
I guess you could say he lied to me to a degree. Yeah. I didn't ask him point blank a question, but he had a pre-printed statement that he would sign. He showed to me. He pulled it out of his desk. And it basically says his beliefs for the Warren Commission, that he agrees with the Warren Commission. And he would sign that. After doing that, he said, I know there are questions that we can't answer. He said, but we did what we had to do. I didn't ask him to qualify that. We talked about the movie JFK. And he said, it's a great movie. But he said, it's all based on innuendo.
It is a good movie.
He said, it's all based on innuendo. And in a court of law, innuendo is not admissible. That was his statement about the movie. Huh? I'm sorry?
And that's why they had to kill Oswald, because they never were going to be able to put him in jail.
Oh, yeah, of course. But Gerald Ford, he is the one that changed the location of the back road.
Right. That is correct.
And
moved it up or down, or
he moved it up so it would work with the magic bullet.
Correct.
And all I can say is I found Gerald Ford to be a rather honorable person. I found him to be a pretty decent person. And all I can think is that he was told, change it.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that.
Listen,
I can imagine Allen Dulles, if you disagreed with Allen Dulles, would destroy you. And Gerald Ford had ambitions. He wanted to become Speaker of the House. He told me that was his greatest ambition. So if Allen Dulles said, do it, you did it. He ran the Warren Commission with an iron hand. And it's my belief, and I have to say my belief.
Okay.
It is my belief, just to say this, that the Warren Commission had to go through the approval of Allen Dulles to state any fact, any formula, any piece of information. It had to go through the strainer of Allen Dulles. That is why it is somewhat inept, because it doesn't really say a lot. It has a lot of words that don't say too much.
So I know you mentioned a lecture. Was it a lecture from one of the
Yes, I saw a lecture. I was at performance, a lecture that Dr. McClellan, Dr. McClellan gave. And he did these talks in various places. And it was fascinating to listen to him because he was standing at the head of JFK at the stretcher at Parkland Hospital.
In Parkland. Okay.
And he said that he observed the cerebellum, which is the bottom part of the brain, ooze out of the back of JFK's head. And he said there was a grapefruit-sized hole in the back of JFK's head. These are doctors. These are trained observers of human conditions. How could every one of them be wrong? Because if you look at the official thing, the hole in the head's over here on the side.
Right.
He said, we are doctors, we are trained, we
Interesting.
know what to see, we understand, we've dealt with gunshot wounds, whereas the folks that did the autopsy didn't. There's so much.
Trauma specialists, these doctors.
Yes, indeed. They saw everything. They didn't see the back wound because they never turned him over. But they did a tracheometry, what do you call that? Tracheotomy, excuse me. That's the word I was trying to think of. I couldn't think of it. They did it where the entrance wound was, and they cut open the neck. And Kennedy was breathing at the time. They said actually they had a pretty decent heartbeat. But there was nothing they could do. His brain was pretty much gone. Even his Secret Service man who jumped on the back of the limousine, he said he could see into his head. The brain was gone. They were just pieces.
Was that Hill?
Yeah. Would have loved to have talked to him, but I never did. I was fortunate to talk to a lot of people.
We know that Jackie went to get part of his brain that was in the back of the car. Everyone thought she was trying to get out. What she was doing is grabbing it back. As a matter of fact, she gives it to the doctors.
Yeah.
It says, will this help? How
She
about
was-
that moment?
She was in absolute shock. Understandably.
Yeah.
But Hill had a lot to say. But I was amazed listening to the doctor talk. And he said, we were basically told that we didn't see what we saw. And that your career could suffer.
So were we.
Your career could suffer if you went against the grain. And so none of these doctors talked while they were in practice. When they retired in later years, then they talked. And even an interesting thing was that one of the doctors, and I can't think of his name, who was working with Lee Harvey Oswald after being shot, there was a direct call from the White House, from LBJ, asking to the condition of the shooter. So much stuff was going.
It's funny. I had a friend who was a retired Yonkers police officer, and he was in Texas working with him and another police officer in Dallas. And that officer's father, he claimed, was the man that was handcuffed to Lee Harvey Oswald with the big white hat. And you may know his name. I don't recall what it was.
I can't think of his
And
name right
he
now,
told
but
my friend. Yeah. He told my friend that everybody on the Dallas police force knew that Lee Harvey Oswald was going to get shot, except my father, because they knew he wouldn't have walked out and come to him if he thought that there was going to be a shooting. And you can see it in his face. He's shocked.
yeah,
But
he was one of the few people that didn't know.
no,
First off,
right.
how does Ruby get in there? He was very
Well,
close to the police
If you've
department.
seen but if you see the video of them during the time he was interviewed, you will see Ruby walking around upstairs when they originally bring him in front of the press.
Sure.
He's in the hallway standing there. And the real moment for me is if you've ever seen the documentary, I think it's called Destiny Denied, by the 4-part documentary. There's a 3-part that's called something else, but Destiny Denied by Oliver Stone on the last, not this most recent release, but on the last time Trump released documents. And there's a video played where you hear the horn honk. When he walks out, there's one honk of a horn. Oswald, and then you hear another long honk, and then Ruby steps out and shoots him. And it's quite eerie. The two most eerie things in that documentary, that is one of them.
Yeah.
The other is when LBJ is getting sworn in and his closest friend is standing in back of him. Now we know the stage. They're on Air Force One. He wants Jackie standing next to him, and Lady Bird tells her, you need to get changed, and she says, I want them to see what they did to Jack, or something to that effect. I may be paraphrasing.
Yeah, indeed.
Or my husband, he may have said. And then he's about to be sworn in. The judge walks in and not saying anything. It was a judge that LBJ wanted promoted farther in the federal system, and JFK denied her that. He said no to LBJ. And of course, that's the judge who swears him in. And he turns around to his friend and winks. And when you see that, that's the moment where you get sick to your stomach.
There was no love. There was no love whatsoever lost between JFK and LBJ. They truly hated. And the whole thing is, the reason he became vice president, he knew about the Addison's disease. And he had the FBI talk to JFK.
Right. The story goes that Bobby and Jack are in the hotel room after he wins the nomination, and they're talking and trying to figure out who to win for vice president. Bobby says, I'm going to go down and take a nap or go down and lay down for a while. He goes downstairs. The FBI come and visit JFK on behalf of J. Edgar Hoover. And you know the J. Edgar Hoover story. Listen, Jack, we know this about you. It's not a big deal. We're going to keep the secret, but you're lucky that we know and nobody else knows. That's the Hoover MO. And says, and we'll keep the secret if you get and have Lyndon Johnson be vice president. So after Bobby is absolutely anybody but LBJ, Jack walks downstairs and asks LBJ to be vice president. He doesn't give him an answer right away. Goes back upstairs. Bobby finds out about it. Goes downstairs to see LBJ and says, please turn it down. And of course, LBJ says, you know what? I'm not turning it down because you're trying to make me turn it down. And next thing you know, that is the first step of many that ends up.
And remember his line.
Long story.
Remember his line. The odds are 1 out of every 4 presidents have died.
He says aide. I forgot about that part. He asks his aide, how many vice presidents become president? And he says, I'm a gambling man. I like those odds.
Yeah.
And I think we should leave it there unless you have something else you need to
There's so many more stories, I tell you, but we can probably talk again about this. But the JFK...
This will be part 1 or maybe...
one of a couple. The JFK assassination, just to close here, is one of complete confusion and complete deliberate confusion. And I think the wisest thing ever said about the Kennedy administration and the Kennedy assassination, I should say, is that we will never know, because everything has been so polluted by the various conspiracy theories, which, if you think about it, many of them were concocted by the CIA to basically throw off the smell of the track.
So it's funny when you listen to the Nixon tapes, you hear him say, he constantly talks about the Bay of Pigs thing. And that was supposedly his code word for the Kennedy assassination.
Sure.
And he would say that Bay of Pigs thing. And he talked about it a lot. We all know. And everybody listens to it says, what is he talking about, Bay of Pigs? He wasn't talking about Bay of Pigs.
No, he
was
wasn't.
talking about the Kennedy assassination.
I always remember on an interview, the guy talked about, maybe was it Walter Cronkite? In an interview with LBJ, saying, what do you think about the Kennedy assassination? Nixon says, I know one thing about Lyndon. He never wanted to be second. I think that says everything.
There's something to that.
Yeah.
There's something to that. And I think we'll end it there for tonight.
Sure. Sounds good. Wonderful conversation. Boy, we covered a lot of stuff.
Two.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
We covered a lot of
I
stuff.
think I'm going to split this into 2 parts.
Sure.
And then we'll do a third.
Okay.
All
Because
right?
there's enough for a third, definitely.
Thank you very much for your time.
Sure.
There's definitely enough for the third. And I'll do that. And we'll maybe map out the third a little more, make sure we cover everything we missed.
I'll throw a teaser in for the third.
Okay.
Where did the brain go? I think I know.
You want to know what I think?
What?
I think Bobby took it and buried it with the body.
I don't think so. I'll save
Good.
that.
So we'll leave it at that.
I'll save that
is
for
the mystery of part 3. Thank you, Jack.
sure.
I love talking about JFK things. Your firsthand knowledge is something that we don't really have access to. So thank you so much.
Sure.
And we'll talk again soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everybody.